Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen, and this week we are taking a look back at an Italian horror classic, and that is House by the Cemetery, directed by Lucio Fulci, the Italian horror maestro, and starring Catriona MacColl. And this is the third in what fans call the Gates of Hell trilogy. And that started with City of the Living Dead, and then The Beyond, and then House by the Cemetery. Now, there really isn't much in the way of relation to this film and the others, other than that Catriona MacColl stars in all three of them. So I don't really know where they get that the connection from, but at any rate, the film starts off in this gothic mansion, the beautiful white house, and apparently it's abandoned because inside it's all dark and beat up and there's cobwebs everywhere. And we see this young woman who is getting dressed. She's like naked and then she's getting herself dressed up. And she's looking for a boyfriend. Apparently they had a few romantic rendezvous at the abandoned house. So she's looking for her boyfriend throughout the house, and he's not answering. So it becomes like a real suspenseful, scary scene. It's in the dark. There's nothing there but cobwebs. So she's looking around. He's not answering, and it's pretty cool. It's really scary, and she does find a boyfriend hanging on the door, and he's all bloody, and he looks like he got stabbed to death like a million times, and obviously he's dead. He's bleeding all over the place. And then she looks around, and a giant knife comes up and goes right through her head, right through her mouth. Really nasty, brutal scene. And then she falls to her death. And it's a scene very reminiscent to The Prowler, another movie from 1981, the same year. And that one's directed by Joseph Zito. So I wonder who did that scene first. You know, it's very similar, death scene there. But at any rate, after that, we meet Dr. Norman Boyle, who's a psychiatrist living in New York City. And he lives there with his wife, Lucy, played by Catriona MacColl, and their young son, Bob, who's about 10 years old. So he finds out one of his colleagues, Dr. Peterson, went crazy and killed his secretary, who he was having an affair with, and then he offed himself. So he wants to try and find out what the hell happened there. So he decides to move briefly to Boston with his wife and son, and try and research what Dr. Peterson was researching and what made him go crazy. So he decides to go to the house where Dr. Peterson was working and where he was doing some research to try and determine what happened to him. So once they move into the house, you can tell right away things are kind of weird, and the house is kind of weird, and there's a lot of noises going on in the middle of the night that they can't explain. Especially the wife, Lucy, hears a lot of things and she starts going crazy. She starts losing her minds. The family accidentally gets attacked by a bat out of nowhere. That was kind of weird. They get attacked by a bat. And the bat bites the shit out of the Dr. Norman, and it's bleeding everywhere. But also Bob, as the movie goes on, he runs into this little redheaded girl by the name of May, and it turns out she's a ghost, actually. And the ghost of May tries to warn Bob about the house and to get out of there, and you shouldn't have come, and you need to get out of there as soon as possible or bad things are going to happen. Because she actually sees the future, and she tries to warn Bob about the future because she's seen all these bad things happen. And then Bob tries to tell her parents about it, and you know, they just laugh it off as, "You're crazy, what are you talking about? You're just seeing things, hearing things." But obviously he's not. It's true. So we meet Anne, who is sent there as Bob's babysitter, and she's kind of weird and unusual, and there's really no explanation. She doesn't talk much, you know. She's kind of bizarre, and what happens is she starts hearing noises too, the babysitter Anne, and while Bob's at the house one day while she's babysitting, Anne starts hearing the noises in the basement. So she tries to open the door to the basement and investigate, see what's causing all the noise down there. And she finds out who it is the hard way. As once she tries to go up the stairs and get out of there because she gets scared, bam, a giant butcher knife comes to the left of her and hacks at her, and then it comes to the right side of her and hacks at her there, and then it slices the hell out of her neck and completely decapitates her, and the head falls right off. So when Bob hears that, he goes to check on Anne because he does hear Anne like screaming and stuff. So he goes to investigate, and he goes down to the cellar to see what's going on. And then he looks up the stairs, and boop, 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 the girl's head is rolling down the stairs. So then he hears more noise and actually sees somebody's coming. So then he runs up the stairs, and his arm gets caught in the door because it's that old rickety-ass door that doesn't want to open. But he does manage to break free eventually. So then, as the movie goes on, Dr. Norman finds out some interesting details about what Dr. Peterson was investigating at that house. We find out that he was researching this surgeon who lived at that house by the name of Dr. Freudstein. And then he finds out that Dr. Freudstein was doing a lot of illegal activities, a little illegal surgical practices, you know. And he ended up actually killing his entire family. He was completely insane and murdered his whole family in that house, including, guess who? May, the ghost girl that Bob keeps meeting up with, was actually his daughter. And he killed his wife, so he killed his whole family in that house. So I guess apparently that's what happened to Dr. Peterson. When he found that out, I guess he went nuts and then killed his secretary and all that. And then he killed himself. And who knows what else. Maybe he lost his mind. Maybe he heard voices in the house, the ghosts of all the people that were murdered in the house. Because we do see the ghost throughout the movie. We also see the ghost of his wife as well. Who we see talking to May throughout the film as well. So yeah, the ghost probably drove him crazy, and then he went and killed his secretary and all that. So as Bob once again goes down to the basement to see if he can find this Dr. Freudstein, he eventually does, and then we see Dr. Freudstein in his full glory, and is a big, hulking, menacing, crusty-ass zombie, you know? And there comes the zombie element, like Lucio Fulci is known for. So it's really interesting. You got the slasher movie, you got the zombie movie, and then you got the haunted house type movie, all in one movie, and it's pretty interesting. But yeah, it's so nasty, it's so gory, it's so brutal. And it's actually really scary at times. So when Bob finally catches up with Mr. Freudstein chases him up the stairs, and then the door is closed, so that rickety old ass beat up door won't open. So he keeps pulling at it, and Dr. Freudstein keeps getting closer, slowly walking up the stairs. And then his mother comes home, Lucy, played by Catriona, MacColl, and she tries to get the door open. She can hear Bob screaming from behind. She tries to get it open with a key, that won't work. She tries to wedge it open with a butcher knife, that won't work. And then the husband, Norman, luckily comes home, and he decides he's going to take an axe and try and open the door. He said, "Bob, get away from the door, I'm going to try and get it open." And he starts stabbing at the door with an axe. But then Dr. Freudstein grabs Bob's head and pushes it against the door. So then you see the father hammering that axe to the door. That's almost hitting his head every time. So it's a really intense, very suspenseful scene. I love it. This movie has some great atmosphere to it, I must say. It's very dark atmosphere. It's very suspenseful, surprisingly, for like a slasher type movie. It's got some nice scares in it. And so yeah, that's a great scene. I love it. And yeah, so definitely, guys, check out House by the Cemetery. It's got some brutal gore effects, some classic slasher type stuff like you would see in the early 80s. You get one girl who was murdered by Dr. Freud's team with a fireplace poker right through the chest and then right in the neck, and the blood splattering and splurting everywhere. It's really brutal. And yeah, and the death scene from Anne at the is really nasty, man. When he cuts her head right open with the butcher knife, it's really graphic and nasty, as Lucio Fulci is certainly known for. So definitely, guys, check out House by the Cemetery, as well as City of the Living Dead and The Beyond, 3 Lucio Fulci classics. And it's also got an excellent score. I forgot to mention another great score from the Lucio Fulci film. Most of them do have excellent horror scores that are really memorable, and this one's no exception. So guys, check out House by the Cemetery from the great horror maestro Lucio Fulci, starring Catriona MacColl, Paolo Malco. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.